one of them. It doesn't make sense. It was a war. It wasn't somebody that met her boyfriend and went to sleep with him. No, I mean that's what the show tells us. I was born in the little town of Vama, spelled W-A-M-A, Bukovina, Romania. My father owned a sawmill. He had cows. He also had a butcher shop in a little town, well, a bigger town, by the name of Kumpulunk. That's still in the Bukovina. That's close to the Ukraine border. I'm saying it's close. It probably takes 2 days to get there, but that's all right. I mean, when I was there, we didn't have highways. We didn't have cars. Because I was born in 1927. My mother came from a very religious family. According to what I was told, my grandfather was a rabbi. But it seems like the rest of the sisters didn't follow the religion. Because my mother married my father, and my father had to turn Jewish. My father wasn't Jewish. But once, I don't know if you know anything about it, once you get circumcised in the Jewish faith, you're Jewish. Even if you're a Christian, you're Jewish. At first it was nice. I went to school. But something was going on. My next door neighbor was a German family by the name of Kobylski. That name I'll never forget. And he kept saying to my mother, my dad, he says, I think if I were you, I'd close shop. Don't go to sell any more meat. And he couldn't tell him what. Why? Well, about 1932, I was 33, I heard in my little tiny town of people going with flags, welcome the Russians. What's the Russians doing here? I mean, you know, everybody was weighing, they're welcoming the Russian, and oh, brother. Anyway, we knew that we were in trouble. I mean, my mother and father knew that we were in trouble. It was something like 8 months or so. I can't recall the exact. Tried to put it down on paper, but I didn't have no pencil. All of a sudden, the flags are going up again. In that little town of Vama, the town of Vama had one bar, and that bar sold everything underneath beside booze. They sold oranges and staples. But in Romania, in that little town that I was living, the families usually had their own food. We had chickens and we had cows and we had milk, okay? Well, in 1934, I was taken out of school by my father, and he kept saying, I said, what's going on? Well, I found out when I was out of school, they had the Jewish kids on one side and the Christian kids on the other side. And here I'm coming out with my father, and I said, huh? What's going on? And my father says, the Nazi have invaded us, and now everybody, they kicked the Russians out, and now everybody's welcoming the Nazis. You know, they figured out to turn around and to be good to the Nazis. Kobylansky was there. He was already an SS man. And his son was an SS man. And he said to my father in German, he says, go to my mother, go through the fence and go to our yard. And don't go, take Annie with you. My name was Anni. It wasn't spelled the same way as now. And so that's what my father did. All of a sudden I see my mother, and I see my sister with him. She was only what? She was 3 years old. She was a baby. I can recall I wanted to run to my mother. Not that I liked her very much, because my father used to take me down in Romania into that bar and used to buy me a pork sandwich. And every time he bought me a pork sandwich, I used to come home, and guess what my mother had? Soap. And she used to wash my mouth up with soap, because I was non-kosher. So, you know, seeing my mother there, you know, she's my mother. They took him away. They took him by cattle train. And they took him to the Ukrainian border. Between Romania and Ukraine was a waterway which is called the Dniestro. It's like the Susquehanna. Kobylansky said, I think you better go too, you know. But we didn't go on the cattle train. We went on a nice train. But that was no good, because my mother and my sister was, you don't want to know. And when they came out, one thing my father didn't do, as a child, all our kids had pierced earrings. And they were usually diamonds or gold and things like that. And, you know, the kids have jewelry and things like that. And Kobylansky told my father, take those things off of her. And father said, no. Well, the Germans came and they took them off, and that's the reason I will never have pierced ears. Because they didn't take it off like you're supposed to take them off. So that was the first experience I had with the Nazis. After that, they made us cross the Dniestro. What they did, first they took all our jewelry. Then they tied a rope across like the Susquehanna. And they started telling people to cross. If you didn't swim, you know, you went down the river. Well, Dad and I went. Dad held on to me, and he took me across. That's the last time I saw my mother. I went over to her and I said, Mom, where are you going? Well, she was mad. because we weren't with her, Dad wasn't with her, and all, you know. If you knew my mother, you know what I'm saying. And but that was the first experience of crossing a river by a rope. Have you ever tried to cross a river by a rope? So when you crossed the river, then the Nazis brought trucks. And they kept saying, which in German, Jehud, means Jews. You go there, let's go there. I asked one of them, I says, how do you know they're not Jewish? He says, they're white. I said, they're white? Over there, they're white too. Well, they speak with an accent, so. So what accent? They speak German, Romanian, Ukraine, a little bit of Russian, Polish. I mean, that's the last time I saw my mother till 1949. When I saw my mother 2 days before I left for the United States. In the meantime, my father and I started wandering. 2 lost souls. We walked and walked. We saw places. Till this day, I look at peas, but I still don't like them. Because I used to go in garbage cans. Whatever we could find. We used to find peeled potato peels, you know. And you know, whatever we could find, we used to ask if we could work. And I worked in tobacco fields. Because they had tobacco in Ukraine. And then we started out, and some bad Nazis came around. And they took my father. And they hacked him up. And they hung him. And they said kosher, they put a sign on him. Translation, kosher meat for sale. I screamed and I cried. I remember that vividly. I screamed and cried. And they left me. They left me like that. They didn't take me any place, they just left me. Pretty soon, another Jeep came around, and there was Kobylansky. I said, where'd you come from? He says, who did that? I says, you see that swastika on your arm? He says, I didn't do it. I says, I know you didn't do it. I says, but the comrades have done it. He says, you know, the only thing I can help you with, because he had some other people with him, and helping me? Oh boy. That could be his head. He says, you have to bury him right here. Probably now there's a highway, a four-lane highway or whatever it is on that highway. I mean, you know, it's been since 1937, you know. We still didn't have cars out there. Maybe in Bucharest they had them, but not in the little town that I lived in. So, he told me that he would have to put me in a concentration camp before he gets in trouble. I asked him one thing, I says, please, because what they did when everybody had a number, but a miracle happened. My sister didn't have a number, and my mother didn't have a number. They must have forgotten, Or they just held their hands down and they didn't see it or something. What the Nazis did to us, they took every young child, 10 and older, and put them on a separate bus and shipped them to Berlin. The Nazis wanted to have a race that was all white. And those children would have white children. And the ones that didn't have any children, they killed them. 2 of my cousins were killed like that. But that's not. So he took me and he put me in Poland. I was there for a while, still eating out of garbage can, because you couldn't wait. Every time you get out of that compound, you get shot. So you sleep on the ground. And I developed typhus. I don't know how many here know what typhus is. Your hair, you lose your hair and your skin comes off all of your body. And it takes weeks and weeks for that to come back. If you don't have any medicine, it takes longer. For a while, my face was partially covered and partially not. My hands were partially. I was a little child. I wasn't anything. At time, I kept praying. I said, "Lord, take me away. It would be better than sleeping on cobblestones." That's a concentration camp. People are laying dead. There is no food. And you go into garbage cans, what are you going to do? You got to survive. As God is my witness, I don't know. I probably had rats for food. I don't know. Somebody gave me some food. How do I know what it is? I was in that concentration camp about 4 months. Then Kobylansky came again. I called him my angel out of nowhere. He was an SS man. I couldn't deny it. But he helped me, and naturally the Jewish people didn't like me associated with an SS man. So I'm a traitor now. And no matter what I told him, that he's good. And then when he left me alone, because somebody heard it, and they went and told, it's like a gossip. Hey, he's in with the Nazis. He's good, man. Maybe you should. So I ended up in Buchenwald. That was a little bit better. It wasn't cold. I didn't have any clothes. I picked out whatever I could. I used to, if I think about it now, I don't know what I had on my feet. I know I was sick. I know they stayed away from me because typhus is contagious. I don't know. They stayed away from me for a while and then they came back, But after that, oh boy. Every day they took kids out of the compound, and every day they told them to go and take a shower. And some of the things is true. They did gas the people. They didn't have no use for them, So they gassed them. They wanted to eliminate everybody that was Jewish. In the meantime, they also eliminated a few Christians that helped the Jews. After that, it was so nice not to hear bombs going off. You know, after a while, your head feels like it's exploding mid-air. How I ended up in all those places, I can't remember. I know I just ended up in those places. How I got there, I don't know. But somebody must have taken me. I ended up in Bucharest. You heard about it. And over there, I slept in a cellar. In Bucharest, they had houses, but they had cellars on the outside. And so you opened up the door and you just crawl in there, and at least it was dry. But I was too close to the oil fields. And they did a good job of them. And you know, the smoke and everything else, sometimes I didn't even show my head out the door. And the water I drank was whatever fell on the ground, that's the water I drank. I didn't have any water. And you know, today they say, oh, the water in the well is no good, it has all kinds of things. I should have been dead by then. If I wasn't dead by then, it doesn't make sense. I was in Bucharest for I was like a lost child. I didn't have no parents. I didn't know where my mother was. I didn't know where my uncle was. I didn't even know where the rabbi was. I was all alone. The only thing with this, I didn't have no papers. I didn't have nothing. I only knew my name. That's it. In the town that I came from. So when you're in Bucharest, and you see those Nazis walking around, you try to hide. But there's no place to hide, literally. But you try to be inconspicuous. I mean, you know, sometimes they thought I was a boy, because I wore pants. I found them probably in a garbage bag, in a garbage can or something like this. I don't know. My aunt in New Jersey used to say, we used to send clothing to you. I said, you did what? Where did the clothing go to? I said, you mean you send them to Europe? You send them to Rome? I said, didn't you read the paper that was a war on? And they said, yeah, but the clothing, they knew that people have to eat and have. This is all good. Nazis have a good time wearing clothes, having towels that they send to, you know, wash. The same Claridge Hotel, Lakewood, New Jersey. I told my aunt, when I came to the United States, I said, what? She said, well, then after that we send the stuff to Israel. I said, to whom? Who was there? Well, they were hoping that the government would give clothing. I said, what, they're going to go over to Germany and give you clothing? There's a lot of people that don't believe all the things that happened. I spoke in front of kids in school. And one of the kids says, that never happened. He says, you don't have a number? I said, would you like for me to take you up there and show you? My parents says, never happened. He says, okay, for the parents, I hope it never happens to them. But you see, a lot of people don't believe it. And because so many people have written books, I was telling Jane, I was there when they made Exodus. I was in Palestine. I was there. And the movie is so far out of, it's somebody in Hollywood really made up a story. And I mean it. It's so far out. I was there. I was in Tel Aviv when the boat came into the harbor. So that's the reason there is a Dr. Ruth. She comes from Hungary. I don't know where she got her doctor's degree, but that's all right. She came to Binghamton. She gave us to give a lecture to us. I don't know what it was. Something it had to do with marriage encounter or something like that. And when she opened her mouth, she says, "Holy smoke, she speaks worse than I am." I mean, she has a worse accent than I have. And so I went into the ladies' room, and she was standing over there, chasing it up. I says, "Dr. Ruth," I says, you're Hungarian." She says, "Yeah." I says, were you taken into a concentration camp from Hungary?" She says, "Read my book." Read my book, buy my book. I said, "Dr. Ruth, I come from that country. I lived it." I says, "I don't think too many Hungarian people were put in a concentration camp. Because most of the Hungarian people changed their names from Levitt to Candor. And who's Candor? Candor is the Prime Minister of Hungary. So, you change your name from one thing to another, and you take a name, but that's the only thing she said. "I don't want to speak to you." I says, "Why?" She says, "Buy my book." I said, "If you'd have been nice to me, maybe I'd have bought the book." But I was in Bucharest for a long time. I lived in a cellar. Then the owner of the cellar was a Jew. Thanks a lot. The owner of the cellar his name was Rappaport. And one day he came out. He was a nice man. And he says, "What are you doing down there?" And I said, "I don't know. I came here from," I says, "I don't know how I ended." I says, I was in Buchenwald. I says, then I came up to Bucharest. I says, I don't know how I came here. He says, "How long have you been in the cellar?" I says, "I don't know." He said, "What's wrong with your face?" I says, "Well, I had typhoid a couple of years ago, and the skin hasn't come back on." He says, "Get in the house." Now, at that time, I wasn't sure to get in anybody's house. Because, he might say Jewish. He told me his name is Rappaport, but then there's a lot of Rappaports. But he was very, very nice. He gave me food. He sent out the woman, I don't know who she was, maybe it was his girlfriend, or I don't know. Sent out the woman to get me some clothes and some shoes. He bought me food that I haven't seen in years. The first thing he says, "I think I better give you some cod liver oil." I says, I remember that my mother gave me that. The only way she could put it down my throat, she would get me an orange on top of it, and oranges were very, very expensive in Romania.